We've done a few of these things, John, Jimmy, and since what are we, jazz masters or what? Yeah, right. But no, Jimmy's been doing it for years. He's a teacher. I'm just a bass player, so I don't really have much to tell the kids other than the fact that I've been trying to play that instrument since 1946.
That's 60 years.
Yeah, almost 60 years, so 58 years or so. But they asked me questions about how to do this. I'm not a teacher. All I can do is say what I think the role of the bass is in a formation. But recently the bass has come to the front as a solo instrument, and very proficient young people are just going over the bass like it's a guitar or a smaller instrument. And they've studied systems that help them to do that, like Scotty LaFaro. When I first met Scotty, he was playing tenor in a dance band out of Detroit. I forget, Amaro or somebody's dance band. And he came to my room, he said, "Oh man, it's neat, I think I want to play the bass, man." And about 2 years later, he had transposed all that tenor facility onto the bass using several fingers, which Mingus used quite a few in the right hand too, but me and Brown, man, we just go for sound with 2 fingers maybe, but Scotty perfected this system of very fast, and Eddie Gomez, he's one of those peaky guys too. But that's not my concept of the bass. All my years I've devoted to getting the sound. The role of the bass, the string bass, John, came about replacing the tuba. The marching band had the tuba. But then when they had a stage presentation, they brought in the string bass which they couldn't walk with in the parade, but they brought in a string bass which sort of substitute for the tuba, but not only was it required to have the ground bass under the harmonic structure of whatever the composition was, but also it became a rhythm instrument too, with a pulsation. So it had a dual role in the stage band or the jazz presentation. And that role was expanded by Jimmy Blanton in Duke Ellington's orchestra because he was very proficient soloist, arco and otherwise too. And his concept changed the whole basic function of the bass in jazz. And he was barely 21 years old when he died, but he revolutionized the concept. So all the bass players after J.B. were influenced by him. And if I find a young bass player who doesn't know about Jimmy Blanton, I'm not even going to talk to him. If he's going to be a jazz player and he doesn't know about Jimmy Blanton, he hadn't done his homework, and he doesn't know where the whole thing changed. But my concept was not the solo, and my role in Modern Jazz Quartet, which was conceived by John Lewis as being 4 voices going along counterpuntally with separate lines that interwove and made sense structurally chord-wise. So that's where I always stayed, was on the ground bass was me. And for all those years, that's 40-some years, that's where I put all my energy in creating a melody to go along with the other 4 instruments and have a melody of my own which indicated the bass line, the movement of the chords from chord to chord. And that's it. And that's where Percy, but now here lately I've been trying to make some solos with it's Johnny come lately stuff though, John. John, I started out so professionally, so young, I mean, as far as playing the instrument. A couple of years after I bought the bass, I was playing professionally already. And Miles, like, what did he like about me was the time. I didn't know too many fancy notes or anything, but I knew, like one time in Birdland, Miles, me and Buhena went out, Art Blakey, we went out around 54th Street, and somebody had handed us this joint from Chicago, man. We went out and said, we lit up this thing around there and said, hey, Dave, we used to call him, say, hey, Dave, when we come back, we're going to get you out the hole. That's what Art Blakey used to say, get out the hole up there, you know. And we did this strange reefer, man. Came back in out of the cold January night, and the heat hit us, and, man, my mouth was dry, lip sticking to your teeth. You know, that permanent smile from that dry mouth smoking this stupid reefer. And Miles knew we were out of it, you know, and he kicked off this thing of George Shearing's, whatever, Constellation or something, one of the fast tune. And we were scrambled eggs back there. and we were smiling at each other. And Miles turned around and said, now you gonna get me out the hole now? And we couldn't even answer. It was just mixed up rhythm back there, which is another thing. Kids don't try to play high. But anyhow, when he came off, he said, I couldn't find one. Percy, where was one? So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. You got to find one before you. So that's what I mean about. But to play with each drummer, there's a marriage that must go on. And some you have to hold back. Like Max had a tendency to rush. Art Blakey had a tendency to rush. But it was swinging on up, the whole thing, you know. And Connie Kay was exact like a metronome. So when Kenny Clark left, I had to readjust to somebody who was not obtrusive. He was just another instrument up there in the quartet. Whereas Kenny Clark was an innovator of his own. First time I played with Kenny, he came and sat in. I'd been playing about a year, a little bit on at the Downbeat in Philadelphia. I'm the house bassist, and these people who come to town would come through and sit in. They come to this jazz club and play and sit in. Scared me to death, man. I didn't know where to play with Kenny Clark. And about 6 months later, I was in Paris with Howard McGee, and in between times, somebody told me, don't listen to those bombs, those accents. Listen to the cymbal, ting, tiki, ting. That's where the beat is. And me and Klute got together with that, and we became the All-American Rhythm Section. We were on so many records, man, together. I had so much fun with these guys. I really miss them, and I was so lucky to be involved with these giants early. And I credit to the fact that I did know where one was from my Baptist upbringing in the Baptist church, where my mother and my grandmother were choir singers. And at an early age, we had a gospel quartet called the Family Four. So I learned where that hand clap was a long way back, man. And that's what got me out there early. But then, subsequently I learned more harmony and whatnot. John Lewis was an excellent teacher. After Jimmy got me started, 'Cause when he was learning, came home from a dance band in the Midwest, Nat Toll's orchestra, and he heard Charlie Parker, and he left that band and came home. And we got an upright piano in the living room in my mother's house. And while he was learning the harmony, I was just learning the bass. So that was my first teacher, Jimmy. Except that I went to Granoff School of Music for a few bass lessons with this old guy who put his hand up there. You could hardly see his fingers moving. Quintelli was. Oh, what a gentle. That's my foundation. Well, I was in the service. I was down at Tuskegee from 43 to late 45. So I didn't hear anything until I got back home from Philadelphia, from Godman Field, Kentucky. I went through the flight training as a Tuskegee Airman down there. I was second lieutenant, and I completed advanced fighter training in a P-47. I flew P-40s and all those other little planes to get to that. But my roommate who went through the whole thing with me, the whole 2 years of training, he got killed at Godman Field, Kentucky in an accident with a P-47. And Mama was a nervous wreck. She was proud of me, becoming an airman. That was quite a thing. It was only about 400 or 500 guys at that time who had completed that program amid all the adversity that they didn't really want us to have at school. But the outfit was one of the greatest outfits in the war, and the reputation is well known now. But at that time, when my roommate got killed, and these guys were coming back from Europe, first lieutenants and captains with missions and all that. So, and then they dropped a bomb on those cities, that atomic thing, and I wasn't too proud of that. So, and Mama was a nervous wreck. So I got out and bought a bass. That's 46. So I hadn't heard of anything except maybe some Louis Jordan or some other blues things down there, some Clean Head Benson or something down there in the South. They didn't know anything about jazz and bebop that whole time I was down there. So I was indoctrinated right away. And my wife, I met in 1947. I'd just been playing about a year. And she knew about Dizzy and the music and had gone to concerts and whatnot. And she was managing a record store in Philadelphia. And she used to call up down the house, I got the latest Charlie Parker, because she'd ordered that because they had other Western classical music recordings in the shop that she managed on Midtown Philadelphia. So that's how I got into, and Jimmy had come home to be involved in that music, and while he was learning the harmonic structure and copying arrangements off of the recordings of Billy Eckstine's band, Jimmy had a 17-piece band that sounded like Dizzy's band. Played all the arrangements, Tad Dameron's arrangements. Jimmy could copy it off. So he's a professor. That's what I told you in the beginning, man. I'm not a teacher. Jimmy Heath is, we've been calling him professor all the time because he was a student of the music and he hung out with Dizzy and learned a lot from. So he's a Dizzy clone, but no, I wasn't exposed to it until I bought the bass. My father, Pop was a subtle little guy, and Mama was a church-going, a choir singer, and Pop, you couldn't get Pop to go to church if you held a gun on him. He said, man, them preachers are full of hokum, he used to say. He wouldn't even go see us do our little Easter thing, our little Jesus wept, little speeches. Pop wouldn't even go see us. He'd get us new little Easter clothes. Now he worked hard, man. But he was a clarinet player in the Elks marching band, the segregated Elks. I never would join those. I'd be the independent Elks and the other segregated Masons, and I wouldn't even join them organizations supposed to be philanthropic, based on Solomon, the black man Solomon, and they're segregated. I could never understand that, man. Anyhow, Pop was a generous soul, man, and he loved Sousa's marches and those things. And played his little clarinet on the weekends. He'd pawn it Monday morning to get 50 cents, $1 or something like that to pay these little 15-cent insurance people who would come Monday morning. Pop worked, man, so hard and supported not only us, 4 kids and my mama, but cousins and everything else were mooching on Pop. But he dedicated little guy, man. But he had a sense of humor. One time when the astronauts landed on the moon, Pop said, "Oh, gee, boy, them guys in Hollywood, they're on a set doing it." He didn't believe they were on the moon dancing around. Boy, I got so much love from him. He told me he never taught us to hate anybody because we're kind of mixed up, the Heaths, genetically, you know. We're Caucasian and Native and everything else, Afro. So our genes are all mixed up. And he never said to hate any part of us, so he was a loving little guy, man. I miss him too. But we used to have some fun. Pop. We used to go down there from Philly. I told you I was born in Wilmington, but then they moved to Philadelphia when I was 8 months old. Jimmy was born in Philadelphia. Tootie was born 12 years later in Philadelphia. My sister, she must have been born in Wilmington too, because she's a year and a half older than I am. But my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, bribed me when I was going to high school with a bicycle. She said, "Oh," because we used to go down in the summertime and take our shoes off and run around in the dirt streets like city kids, you know, visiting my grandparents, because my father's mother, Mattie, her husband, Oliver Fisher, which was a later marriage, had a grocery store in Wilmington, over in that black district. And they were quite well off, and we used to leave Philly in the summertime and go down the south and visit our grandparents. So Mattie bribed me once to stay down there when I was just about in high school. I did 1 year high school in Philadelphia. And she said, "If you stay down here, Percy, I'll buy you a bicycle." So she bribed me with this Dixie Flyer, nice bike. And Jimmy, of course, if I'm going to stay down there, he's going to stay down there too. So actually he finished high school down there too, but I went 2 years down there. It was 11th grade down there for high school. So I finished school down there. I was just turned 17. But early years when my great-grandmother was living down there, and my great-grandfather, Stanton B. Heath, whose name we have, the family, and he used to have a dray. You know what a dray is, John? It's a 2-wheel cart drawn by a horse or a donkey. And he used to haul cotton from bales of cotton from the boats in Wilmington to this place called the Cotton Exchange down there, where they used to store all the cotton before they sold it, coming in or went out on boats and whatnot. And we used to wait for him to come by every day at noon. He'd come by on the way for lunch, and we'd jump on the back of this dray and ride 2 blocks away where my great-grandmother lived from my grandmother's house where we were staying, and get this ride on the back of this thing and run back in the noonday sun. That ground would burn your feet, man. You had to run and find a little patch of grass that was cool on the bottom of your feet to run back to these 2 blocks. We used to do that every afternoon. But anyhow, Stanton B. had a little candy shop down there, and he used to sit around. He was very intelligent, and he used to sit around and read the daily newspaper to all these old guys that used to sit around and analyze the news. And Camilla, my great-grandmother, sold peanuts. She roasted them in this wood stove, man. The poor old lady was dripping around, sweat down there in her 90s. And she'd get this big bag of peanuts from my grandfather's grocery store and roast them and sit out on the porch and sell them. And kids used to come from miles around because Mrs. Heath would have a glass that she measured this little penny's worth of peanuts and put in this bag, and she'd look at the kid, and the kid be standing there like that. She'd reach and throw a few. She gave away so many. Nice lady, but she gave away so many peanuts. The kids used to come from miles around to get me, and she made some brown dog candy with that peanut. I wish I hadn't let that. Well, it's too much sugar, but I wish I hadn't let that recipe get away. But that was Carmela, and she was a Mohawk. I have a picture of her and Maddie in my house out there that I got from my grandmother's house. But they're all gone now from down there, but I have fond memories of Wilmington and 2 years of high school down there. And I was, the state president of the High Y organization, and this little Christian Y thing, and making speeches in Greensboro. And I was a city slicker, moving down there. Just took over more or less. And Jimmy, that's where he got in the band. And he chose an alto at that time. And he stayed down there. He had to stay down there a year or so after I left, after I graduated. But he was in the band down there. I don't know, she was about 93 or 92 or 3 when I was 12, and 19 when I was 12. I must have been 1934, 35. Somewhere in there.
And your great-grandmother, you knew?
That's my great-grandmother. Carmela was that old. She was 90-something. Maddie only lived to be, my father's mother only lived to be 86. Pop only made it till 72. Mama was younger than that. She never got over Pop dying after all those years, I guess. She had this, hardening arteries or something. All she could say is, your father left me and didn't even say goodbye. So we lost our parents in the 70s, early 70s, 1970 to be exactly, 71. But to answer your question, he saw us all individually become successful musicians, which he bought me a violin when I was 7 years old or something like that. I used to play at church teas and things like that when I was singing in that family gospel thing. And then I used to sing on a kiddie hour, a Seafield kiddie hour in Philadelphia, and that's when I knew Joe Wilder. Joe Wilder was 13, I was 12. He was playing his trumpet on the Sunday morning broadcast it was Parisian tailors. It was ready-made clothes on South Street in the ghetto of Philly, as opposed to the sponsored by Horn and Hardart kiddie hour for the other kids, But it was fun. We had tap dancers and singers on there, and I was the Eddie Cantor. I used to sing, potatoes are cheaper, and now's the time, all that kind of stuff. And Peter Packer picked a pack of, all kind of silly. But I was on that show, and that's how I got to go to the Lincoln Theater, which was connected to that show in Philadelphia, which was on the Chitlin circuit. People from like Scott and Pedersen and he was and people like Mraz. The Mraz was a violinist first, see, and I don't know what Pedersen played before, but he plays the bass like it's a smaller instrument too. He's all over it, and that facility and that use of several things. Mingus was pretty fast too, but at the time when I first bought the bass, Ray Brown showed me how to hold the bass. I was grabbing the neck like this, which Pettifoot did, but it didn't matter to him because he had perfect, but proper positioning. Brown said, P, you're going to have to get your spider together. That means you're walking around like it's over the fingerboard. But this right-hand concept of reproducing what the left hand did, that's where the tonality, the best sound of the bass that I learned was the pressure with the left hand and the balance between the pull with the right hand. There's some pictures of me way back in the beginning when I had one string pulled all the way over to the other string, man. I was gorilla in the bass. But years with the quartet, and when I acquired this instrument that's in the background, that nice 300-year-old Italian instrument, which some young bass players may not have the advantage of having the sound reproduced like this instrument that I was fortunate enough to find in 1956. I got it. But not only a quality instrument, but any instrument, the balance between the two hands to get a pizzicato tonality of the best tone that you get. And then the position of the hand, the distance between the bridge and where you play with the right hand. There's a different sound everywhere in that whole range of maybe 2 feet or more, which changes. It either projects or it's softer, a softer contact, the initial ping. And John didn't like me to play down close to the bridge. It was too pronounced. And he wanted me to play up, he wanted me to soften the attack, which I learned to come up higher and do. But the fast players play this way, and they get a pingy, 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 pingy sound. But I like the guts of the instrument, the balls, if you excuse me. But I asked Eddie Gomez once, I said, Eddie, why you play up there all the time, up in the thumb position? He said, oh, it's easy up there. I said, no shit, I never knew that, because I never go up there, I said, well, he's throwing away the whole bass to get up there to play ping. I said, why don't you get a cello? But Eddie's a good player, too. All these guys, each player, I want to tell the young people, if they want to play that instrument, they have to listen to every bass player that they could, because every one of them has something for you to learn from. I listened to every bass player on record, and some of those I was privileged to go hear in person, like some of those good Philadelphia bass players that are out there now, boy, Christian and oh boy, there are a lot of them that I listened to and say, oh man, I wish I could do that, But I never attempted to do those things. So what I tried to do is leave a good foundation about keeping that swing, Duke Ellington said it don't mean a thing, so if you playing tinky, pinky, 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 and you ain't got no swing in there, you could be a hell of a musician, but jazz? You got to tap your foot and nod your head when you listen to jazz, as far as I'm concerned. But if you want to throw that away and be a tremendous virtuoso on the bass, that's a privilege too, a choice that one makes. But I'm stuck with that other thing, man. It's too bad. I probably lost out on a lot by concentrating on the one thing. I used to follow McKibben around when he was with Dizzy after Brown left. And I'd hear something on a record. I'd say, hey, man, what did you do there? Oh, man, that ain't nothing. I just did. I said, well, when you played so-and-so, so I'm picking their brains, everybody. I listened to Walter Page with Count Basie. And this record I made way back was, Blue Haze or something. Bob Weinstock said, put the lights out and let's play a slow blues. And Miles said, Percy, you walk a couple of choruses in front. And when I walked a couple of lines, a couple of choruses, using Walter Page's bass line from Count Basie, but embellishing in with some in-between notes. And somebody wrote it up in the downbeat and analyzed it. He said, oh, and here he did. I said, no shit, I did what? And he analyzed it for me. But all my concept was the certain notes, strong notes in the chord, in the triad, should be, for instance, if you want to establish a chord, a tonality, the strongest note is the tonic in that chord. The second beat in jazz is emphasized as far as the hand on the 2 and 4. So they don't require a stronger note as 1 and 3. So you can have a leading tone of a weaker note in the not weaker, but a lesser note in the harmonic structure of a chord, and leading tone into the next beat, which needs the strength of the note. So this is my whole concept about keeping that swing, is also through the tone that you choose to be a leading tone and a strong tone in the 4/4 measure. And if you can keep that in mind when you create your line, it's going to swing. And it's going to also indicate where the progression changes, you know, and where it needs strengthening. Like when Ornette wanted me to make this record with him way back there, and I said, look, Ornette, I like what you were doing with Charlie Hayden, and you know, he and they used to look each other in the eye and know exactly where they were going, these little turns. And I said, Ornette, when the change comes for that certain bar, I'm changing. He said, that's what I want you to do, Percy. I want you to do what you do. But I didn't want to interfere with his freedom to make these little transitions and that they did so well, man. It was amazing when I first heard them. He and Don Cherry and Charlie Hayden. And I think Billy Higgins was there too earlier, and Blackwell, but and Moffett, all the drummers, you know, but the swing was there, and it sounded to me as though Ornette had heard Charlie Parker and absorbed that and everything else before that, and he had come up with a concept utilizing, which is, that's what I meant about telling the kids, listen to everybody who went before. You have the advantage of recordings. And from every one you can learn something. Some of them you can learn what not to do, too. You know, the first Modern Jazz Quartet record we made, we went to Japan right after that, and this jockey, Terry, I forget his last name, he took us to this place on the Ginza where they had a little jazz quartet, same instrumentation, and they played the first recordings that we made, including the mistakes. And I just sat there and said, oh, nice. But I was hoping I'd never hear that note again, even on record. Here's this guy copied, and he's smiling at me playing the wrong note. Or, no, not wrong, but the note that I wish I hadn't played. So you copy, you know, absorb things, but you don't have to make the mistakes. The professional guy like Milt Jackson used to hit a crack, but he could turn it into the note he intended to instantaneously, and that's where and they use that word genius. I hate to do it, but that man sure was, as far as that Bible harp. I love him, man. He had delusions about the financial reward he should have gotten, which rightfully so, he should have been a millionaire. But I was making enough to raise my 3 sons and my wife and have a house, and I didn't need any more than that. But Jackson always felt that we were the best in the world, man. We don't. He was looking at it differently, as a business more than the creating of the art form, which he was he could make that cold instrument warm. He's a beautiful player, man. And those years between him and John, there I was getting paid, man. God damn, how lucky can a man be, you know? Oh boy, I miss those guys. There's another thing about playing, and notes, booga booga booga, that's okay. But to learn, after you got out of music school and you go through all the sequences and all the scales and you run through the instrument like it's nothing. I told Nils too, Henning, I said, man, why don't you take a breath sometime? And years later he said, hey, you hear me, I'm breathing, Percy, but I used to tell him, you just play on and on. And he plays Brown stuff, he played Pettiford stuff, everybody. Just good notes. But Ben Webster never played a note that didn't mean something in his whole life that I heard. You have to learn all those notes and scales and everything. That's a beautiful foundation. But then you have to spend a lifetime finding out what to leave out. Because just playing all those notes, and it comes at maturity, I guess, when you live a little and you have some expression to give through the music, which is what you're supposed to be doing, expressing your life. That's what a jazz musician does. Like all the real players from years before, you could identify them by their sound and their voice, their statements. And if you don't have anything to say other than you practiced a lot of scales and things, then you're going to have to learn what to throw away and how to pick out. Lester could pick out one note and say more than most players could say in two courses, you know. But that's what you want to do to become a jazz player, an instrumentalist and a soloist. Find out how to say something, some emotion or some kind of statement. Say something, don't just play. Identify with somebody out there. Play two notes that this man feels or that woman feels. You know, this is the challenge of improvising. Yeah, well, I was lucky enough to afford to be a jazz player, which is a lot of players sacrificed for the love of the music, but never did receive a financial reward of any kind, you know, from it. Maybe not even a decent livelihood, some of them. Then they subsequently got involved with drugs and depression and everything, but they gave their life probably to the development of music. So I would say to a young person, if he's looking to be financially successful jazz player, he might, but then he might not, or she might not. So if you don't love the music and want to dedicate your life to it, to the onward continuance of the art form, and to be a player and learn to express that feeling, that jazz, all that jazz that they used to put down. If you're not prepared to sacrifice like that, don't look to jump in there and be no rock star millionaire. Forget it. Because if you want to dedicate your life to the continuing of the art form, go ahead, man, because you could. A lot of families, parents have discouraged kids, even in the black community. They just say, well, you want to play that jazz, you ain't going to make no money, you know. And so it's constant dilemma to choose a life of dedication to the music, and maybe you'll make enough for a living. I'm cool, you know. I'm back in when, let's see, after first 22 years or something like that, we were making $600 a week whether we worked or not, you know, every week of the year, which was tremendous. But we had 2 decades of working up to that at that time, and still wasn't enough for Milt, like we spoke to about before, because it wasn't enough for me. I had my wife June and Percy and Jason and Stuart, my 3 boys. That was enough. We moved to Montauk in the summertime from our house in Queens and spent those weeks that I told Monte K, our manager, look, man, when school is out, forget it. Don't book me nowhere, because I'm gone most of the year to make that $600 a week. So when school's out, forget it. I got a family. You guys, anywhere you hang your hat is home, you know. So June and I started going to Montauk for 10 weeks, which was a wonder. I'm lucky to be able to make that kind of life out of it. And so if you're looking at, well, the first few years, I remember we used to make $1,000 a week for the quartet to drive back and forth to Philadelphia, $800 a week to play every night in a club and come back overnight. John was still in school, you know, so it started out not that luxurious, but then we ended up flying first class in America, business class overseas. We had a corporation we formed. It was a partnership, and everything was divided equally. We each had a job. John was a musical director. Jackson was a publicity dude, which most of the time he talked about himself, but that was cool. He deserved that. But then Connie was supposed to be in charge of transportation, and I handled the money from all over the countries. I could pay out the guys in every country we went to, but we persevered and did. But as a young player, you might not get started. And let your family take care of you while you get started, man. Say, hey, Pop, one of these days I'm going to be famous. Support me. No, it's a difficult choice to make, John. But like I said, the love of the music is rewarding enough. Whether you just make enough to eat and keep a roof over your head, you'll be lucky, man. But then you can make a bubblegum pop record. And I don't know if you're satisfied with yourself, but you could make a better living than trying to be a purist. It ain't easy.